June 15, 1944, Chengdu, China. The sky thunders with Wright cyclone engines as ground crews complete final pre-flight checks on massive silver shapes scattered across the runway. 68 Boeing B-29 superfortresses of the 58th Bombardment Wing sit fueled and armed, their gleaming aluminum skin reflecting the afternoon sun over western China. Intelligence report from theater headquarters confirms target selection. Imperial Iron and Steel Works at Yawata, Kyushu, Japan. Estimated production 24% of Japanese steel output. Time to target, 8 hours and 47 minutes flying time. Captain Herman Sanken adjusted his pilot controls and reviewed the mission briefing with his crew aboard Lady Hamilton. Among his 11-man crew was Technical Sergeant William Chen, the central fire control gunner who had trained extensively on the revolutionary General Electric fire control system that would soon shock Japanese interceptors. What none of the American aircrews knew was that this night would mark the first encounter between Japanese fighter pilots and the most advanced defensive gunnery system ever mounted on a bomber. The Japanese pilots, stationed at Ozuki and Ashiya airfields, had studied intelligence reports about the mysterious new American bomber that had appeared over Chinese battlefields in recent weeks. Their assessment remained incomplete about the strange four-engine aircraft's defensive capabilities. Within hours, that uncertainty would transform into stunned bewilderment. The Imperial Japanese Army Air Force and Naval Air Force had dominated Asian skies for nearly 3 years. The Kawasaki Ki-61 high-ends climbing ability and the Kawasaki Ki-45 Toryu's twin-engine power had become the scourge of Allied bomber formations. Service ceiling of 35,000 feet, climbing rate to 20,000 feet in 12 minutes, maximum speed of 368 miles per hour. These specifications had translated into devastating victories across China, Southeast Asia, and the early Pacific campaigns. American bomber crews flying their Boeing B-17 Flying Fortresses and consolidated B-24 Liberators had learned through blood and terror that engaging Japanese interceptors meant accepting casualty rates, exceeding 20% on major missions. But the B-29 Superfortress represented a quantum leap in bomber defensive philosophy. 4 Wright R-3350 duplex Cyclone 18-cylinder engines, each producing 2,200 horsepower at takeoff power settings. Turbo superchargers maintaining full power at altitudes where conventional fighters gasped for air. Maximum speed of 358 miles per hour at altitude. Service ceiling of 31,850 feet, and mounted throughout the aircraft, the most sophisticated gunnery system ever conceived. Technical Sergeant Chen had studied these systems during intensive training at Smoky Hill Army Airfield, Kansas. A machinist from Detroit, Michigan, who had learned precision manufacturing in automobile plants, Chen understood that the Superfortress advantage lay not in traditional manually aimed defensive guns, but in computer-controlled remote turrets that eliminated human error from gunnery calculations. 5 General Electric analog computers calculating range, deflection, parallax, gravity, temperature, and atmospheric conditions. Strike with mathematical precision from ranges exceeding 900 yards. These tactics demanded absolute trust in technology and complete abandonment of conventional bomber defense concepts. Aboard the approaching Japanese interceptor formations, veteran pilots from the 19th Air Brigade flew their standard night interception patterns. The mixed force of Kawasaki Ki-45 Toryu heavy fighters and Kawasaki Ki-61 Hien interceptors represented the finest night fighter capability available to defend the Japanese home islands. These pilots had swept across Asian skies from China to the Dutch East Indies, rarely encountering bomber formations they could not devastate through conventional close-range attacks. The evening's mission appeared routine to Japanese flight leaders. Intercept the American bomber formation over northern Kyushu, engage using standard head-on attacks from 12 o'clock high, exploit the traditional blind spots in bomber defensive coverage. Japanese pilots had noticed occasional four-engine aircraft during reconnaissance flights over China, but intelligence assessments classified these as transport or cargo variants unsuitable for strategic bombing. The possibility that Americans had developed a bomber specifically designed to revolutionize defensive gunnery had not occurred to Japanese tactical planners. But at 21,000 feet above the East China Sea, the B-29 formation held technological superiority beyond Japanese comprehension. Technical Sergeant Chen monitored his central fire control station as radar operators detected the approaching interceptors. The General Electric Fire Control System automatically calculated intercept courses and began tracking multiple targets simultaneously. The remote-controlled turrets rotated smoothly to optimal firing positions, their twin 50-caliber Browning machine guns loaded with armor-piercing incendiary rounds. At 11 minutes past midnight, local time, the first Japanese night fighter began its attack run against Lady Hamilton, flying a standard 12 o'clock high approach that had proven devastatingly effective against B-17s and B-24s. Warrant Officer Sadamitsu Kimura, in his Ki-45, closed to what he considered optimal firing range of 400 meters. Chen's fire control computer had been tracking the interceptor for 37 seconds, calculating precise deflection angles and range corrections. At 850 yards, far beyond the effective range of any conventional bomber defensive system, Chen triggered the upper front turret. The two 50-caliber machine guns fired a 3-second burst, guided by mathematical precision that no human gunner could achieve. The armor-piercing incendiary rounds struck Kimura's fighter at the wing root, severing control cables and igniting fuel lines. The Ki-45 disintegrated in a ball of flame before its pilot could comprehend what had destroyed him. As Chen's computer automatically transferred control to the upper aft turret, a second Japanese fighter attempted to exploit what should have been the bomber's blind spot at 7 o'clock high. The remote turret swiveled with mechanical precision and opened fire at 700 yards, sending the Hien spinning into the darkness, trailing smoke and debris. The pilot, Flight Sergeant Ichiro Nakamura, had managed to bail out, but later reported to intelligence officers that he had been engaged by what appeared to be multiple gunners, firing with impossible accuracy from ranges that made no tactical sense. Technical Sergeant Chen had destroyed 2 Japanese night fighters in less than 90 seconds using defensive systems that revolutionized aerial warfare. The engagement lasted precisely 4 minutes and 23 seconds. The 58th Bombardment Wing claimed 7 confirmed Japanese aircraft destroyed, including victories by crews aboard superfortresses named Ding Hao, General H. Arnold Special, and Ramp Tramp. 2 B-29s were lost to operational causes, but none fell to Japanese interceptors during the actual bombing run over Yawata. Japanese after-action reports expressed complete confusion and tactical bewilderment. Pilots described bomber formations possessing defensive systems that engaged from impossible ranges with mathematical accuracy. The comfortable world of close-range fighter versus bomber combat, where Japanese pilots excelled, had suddenly become a long-range precision engagement, where American technology neutralized traditional fighter advantages. Multiple interceptor pilots reported being fired upon by bombers they had not yet closed within 500 meters of, suggesting defensive systems beyond their comprehension. This technological revolution sent shockwaves through Japanese Army Air Force headquarters at Tokyo. Intelligence officers scrambled to reassess the B-29's capabilities based on pilot debriefings and captured gun camera footage. The aircraft's 4-engine configuration and massive size had led them to categorize it as a strategic transport or cargo hauler, unsuitable for precision bombing missions. They had not anticipated that American engineers had created something entirely new, a bomber that achieved defensive superiority through computer-controlled gunnery rather than manual fire control. The technical superiority represented by the B-29's defensive systems became increasingly apparent through subsequent encounters. The General Electric Fire Control computers automatically compensated for bomber airspeed, target deflection, atmospheric conditions, and parallax errors between sighting stations and remote turrets. Its ability to engage multiple targets simultaneously meant Japanese formations could not overwhelm individual bombers through coordinated attacks. Its effective range of 900 yards allowed defensive fire to begin long before Japanese fighters reached their own optimal attack positions. On August 20, 1944, the reality of this new threat became undeniable. 61 B-29s escorting themselves to Yawata encountered approximately 100 Japanese interceptors. Traditional fighter tactics suggested the outnumbered bombers should suffer catastrophic losses against such overwhelming opposition. Instead, the superfortress's computer-controlled defensive systems engaged Japanese formations from ranges and with accuracy that made conventional fighter attacks virtually suicidal. Technical Sergeant Robert Martinez, now flying regularly with the 462nd Bombardment Group while training replacement crews, demonstrated the fire control system's lethal efficiency. His central computer simultaneously tracked 6 approaching Ki-61s, automatically prioritizing threats based on closing rate and attack angle. The system engaged the most dangerous targets first, destroying 3 fighters in rapid succession while computing firing solutions for the remaining interceptors. Japanese pilots attempting to coordinate attacks found their formations decimated by precision fire from ranges they could not effectively return. The mathematics of remote-controlled defensive fire were something Japanese fighter pilots had never encountered. While a Ki-45 could close rapidly on traditional bombers, it could not survive the accurate fire that began at 800 yards and continued throughout its attack run. It could not exploit blind spots that no longer existed due to remote turret coverage. It could not overwhelm defensive systems that calculated optimal firing solutions faster than human reflexes could respond. Veteran Japanese pilots struggled to adapt tactics developed for conventional bomber interception. Their entire training emphasized close-range precision shooting, getting within 200 meters through superior speed and maneuverability. Against the B-29, these tactics were mathematically impossible. By the time a Japanese fighter maneuvered into effective firing position, the bomber's defensive systems had already calculated multiple firing solutions and engaged the threat with computer-guided accuracy. The psychological impact proved as devastating as the technological disadvantage. Japanese pilots who had enjoyed qualitative superiority since the war's beginning found themselves helpless against defensive systems that engaged them far beyond their own effective range. The stress of approaching bomber formations, knowing that accurate fire would begin at 800 yards, eroded combat effectiveness. Some pilots developed what medical officers described as defensive psychosis, an inability to close within effective range of B-29 formations. By September 1944, the B-29 presence in the China-Burma-India theater was expanding despite logistical challenges. The 440th Bombardment Group was completing transition training on the superfortress. The 462nd Bombardment Group, an experienced B-24 unit, began intensive fire control systems training in preparation for B-29 operations. Each new crew that completed training had studied combat reports from technical sergeants Chen and Martinez, refining defensive techniques that maximized the General Electric System's advantages. The training programs instituted by Bombardment Group commanders emphasized fire control discipline above traditional gunnery skills. Computer accuracy as life insurance became the standard doctrine. Mathematical precision is survival. Gunners learned to trust their analog computers completely, allowing the systems to calculate firing solutions while maintaining visual contact with multiple threats. The high-speed tracking system allowed continuous target engagement, while the computer calculated lead angles for maximum hit probability. Japanese attempts to counter these defensive systems proved largely ineffective. The Nakajima Ki-84 Frank, appearing in limited numbers during late 1944, was designed specifically to engage high-altitude American bombers with improved climbing performance and heavier armament. But even the Frank could not effectively engage B-29 formations, whose defensive systems began accurate fire at ranges where Japanese weapons were ineffective. Intelligence reports from Japanese interceptor units revealed growing desperation and tactical confusion. Pilots were instructed to avoid engagement with B-29 formations unless possessing overwhelming numerical superiority and advantageous positioning. Even then, attacks were discouraged against formations whose defensive systems appeared to track multiple targets simultaneously. Some units attempted to develop new tactics involving coordinated attacks from multiple directions, but the fire control computer's ability to prioritize threats and engage them sequentially negated these efforts. The industrial dynamics compounded Japan's tactical disadvantage. Boeing's production facilities in Wichita, Kansas, and Renton, Washington, were achieving remarkable manufacturing efficiency. By October 1944, the combined production lines were producing approximately 10 B-29s per day. Each aircraft required approximately 50,000 man-hours to construct, but American industrial capacity made this investment sustainable despite the bomber's complexity. Japanese aircraft production, constrained by material shortages and strategic bombing damage, struggled to replace interceptor losses while maintaining qualitative standards. Training disparities widened the technological gap. American B-29 gunners arrived in theater with extensive training on the General Electric fire control systems, including practical experience engaging targets at maximum effective range. Japanese replacement pilots, rushed through abbreviated training programs due to combat attrition, averaged minimal experience with night interception techniques. Many had never engaged four-engine bombers or encountered defensive systems that could track multiple targets simultaneously. The strategic bombing campaign against Japan demonstrated the B-29's revolutionary impact. When superfortresses began operations from the Mariana Islands in November 1944, their defensive systems provided coverage for formations penetrating to the heart of Japanese industrial centers. Japanese interceptors attempting to defend Tokyo and other major cities found themselves outranged by defensive fire that began before they could close to effective attacking distance. The Battle of Tokyo on November 24, 1944, marked the strategic vindication of computer-controlled defensive systems. 111 B-29s attacked the Nakajima aircraft engine plant in broad daylight, confident their fire control systems could defeat Japanese interceptor responses. When approximately 50 Japanese fighters rose to intercept the formation, the superfortresses executed perfect defensive coordination, with individual fire control computers sharing target tracking information across the formation. Among the B-29 crews establishing defensive superiority over Japan, several technical sergeants became legendary for their mastery of the General Electric systems. Technical Sergeant Martinez of the 462nd Bombardment Group refined computer-assisted gunnery to mathematical perfection, eventually claiming 12 confirmed interceptor victories without losing a bomber to fighter attack. Technical Sergeant Chen continued his remarkable success rate, demonstrating uncanny ability to coordinate multiple turret systems for maximum defensive coverage. In December 1944, a new specialist entered the fire control community. Technical Sergeant James O'Connor, assigned to the newly formed 313th Bombardment Wing's 6th Bombardment Group, claimed his first victories on December 3 over Tokyo. Flying defensive systems on a superfortress named Silver Eagle, O'Connor's crew encountered approximately 30 Japanese interceptors, attempting coordinated attacks from multiple altitudes and directions. In his first major engagement, O'Connor's fire control systems simultaneously tracked and engaged 8 separate targets, destroying 4 Ki-61s and 2 Ki-45s, while damaging several others sufficiently to break up their attack formations. His defensive technique emphasized maximum utilization of the computer's calculating capacity, allowing the system to prioritize threats while maintaining continuous fire against the most dangerous interceptors. O'Connor's tactical philosophy represented the evolution of B-29 defensive doctrine beyond individual gunnery toward integrated fire control systems. He would eventually write technical bulletins on computer-assisted defensive tactics that became standard training material throughout the 20th Air Force. His innovations included synchronized turret coordination that created overlapping fields of fire no Japanese formation could penetrate, and sequential target engagement that maximized ammunition effectiveness. The strategic implications of B-29 defensive superiority extended far beyond individual combat engagements. The superfortress's operational radius, exceeding 2,000 miles with maximum fuel load, allowed American planners to strike Japanese industrial targets, previously considered invulnerable. Defensive systems could protect bomber formations throughout their entire mission profile, eliminating the vulnerability windows that Japanese interceptors had previously exploited. On February 19, 1945, the B-29's defensive capabilities enabled one of the war's most significant strategic bombing campaigns. Major General Curtis LeMay's decision to conduct low-altitude incendiary attacks required removing defensive armament to maximize bomb loads, but earlier high-altitude missions had already demonstrated that Japanese interceptor capability was effectively neutralized. The fire control systems had achieved such complete defensive superiority that many bombers could operate without defensive armament. The psychological transformation wrought by B-29 defensive systems was perhaps more significant than their tactical impact. Japanese interceptor pilots who had entered the war confident in their qualitative superiority found themselves helpless against defensive technology they could neither understand nor counter. Combat reports captured after the war revealed profound demoralization among Japanese fighter pilots facing superfortress formations. Some pilots wrote of nightmares involving silver bombers whose guns fired with mathematical precision from impossible ranges. Others requested transfers to ground attack units rather than face B-29 defensive systems again. The psychological pressure of approaching bomber formations, knowing that accurate fire would begin at 800 yards and continue throughout any attack run, proved unbearable for many experienced pilots. American B-29 crews, conversely, flew with unprecedented confidence in their defensive systems. The General Electric Fire Control gave them technological superiority over any Japanese interceptor. They could engage threats from maximum range while maintaining formation discipline and bombing accuracy. This psychological advantage proved as valuable as the technological superiority, enabling crews to execute precision bombing missions deep into Japanese airspace. Technical Sergeant Chen exemplified this confidence evolution. By March 1945, he had perfected fire control techniques that maximized the system's calculating capacity while minimizing ammunition consumption. His defensive engagements averaged 67 rounds fired per confirmed interceptor victory, demonstrating remarkable integration between human operator and analog computer. Chen's eventual total of 18 confirmed victories, all scored using B-29 fire control systems, represented not just personal skill, but systematic technological superiority. His most spectacular engagement occurred over Kobe on March 16, 1945, when his fire control computer simultaneously tracked 12 Japanese interceptors, attempting a coordinated attack from multiple directions. The system automatically prioritized threats based on closing rate and attack angle, engaging the most dangerous targets while calculating firing solutions for secondary threats. Chen destroyed 5 interceptors in 3 minutes using precision fire that left the surviving Japanese pilots unable to press their attacks. Technical Sergeant O'Connor pushed the defensive systems even further toward their theoretical limits. His technical innovations focused on maximizing the computer's ability to coordinate multiple turret systems for overlapping defensive coverage. O'Connor developed techniques for sequential target engagement that allowed single fire control systems to engage multiple interceptors with minimal ammunition expenditure while maintaining continuous defensive fire. His eventual record of 22 confirmed interceptor victories scored between December 1944 and August 1945 demonstrated the lethal efficiency of properly coordinated defensive systems. The technological evolution of the B-29 fire control continued throughout the strategic bombing campaign. Improved analog computers increased calculating speed and accuracy. Enhanced turret mechanisms improved tracking speed and reduced mechanical failures. Each technical improvement shifted the defensive equation further in America's favor. The latest fire control systems could engage targets at ranges exceeding 1,000 yards with accuracy that made Japanese interception virtually suicidal. Japanese fighters attempting to close within effective range faced 3 to 4 minutes of continuous, mathematically precise defensive fire that few aircraft could survive. Japanese responses became increasingly desperate as conventional interception proved impossible. Ramming attacks, considered honorable if wasteful, increased as conventional tactics failed completely. Special attack units prepared for suicide missions against B-29 formations. Some pilots attempted to approach bomber formations from directly below, where defensive coverage was theoretically limited, but the fire control system's ability to coordinate multiple turrets negated this tactical approach. These desperate measures achieved occasional success, but could not alter the fundamental technological imbalance that favored American defensive systems. The strategic bombing campaign against Japan was enabled by B-29 defensive superiority that protected bomber formations throughout their operational radius. Japanese interceptor forces, unable to inflict meaningful casualties on superfortress formations, were reduced to ineffective harassment attacks on the margins of bomber streams. By June 1945, Japanese air power over the home islands had effectively ceased meaningful opposition to B-29 operations. The remaining experienced interceptor pilots had been withdrawn to preserve them for homeland defense against an anticipated invasion. Replacement pilots with minimal training and obsolete aircraft were sacrificed in futile defensive gestures that achieved nothing against computer-controlled defensive systems. The human cost differential was mathematically stark. Between June 1944 and August 1945, B-29 defensive systems in the Pacific Theater claimed over 800 Japanese interceptors destroyed in verified air-to-air combat. American B-29 losses to Japanese fighter action totaled fewer than 90 aircraft. The defensive kill ratio exceeded 8-1, unprecedented in aerial warfare history. Beyond statistics, the B-29's defensive impact was genuinely revolutionary. It proved that technological superiority, properly integrated with human operators, could achieve defensive effectiveness that traditional gunnery could never match. It demonstrated that computer-controlled systems were not about replacing human gunners, but about amplifying their effectiveness through mathematical precision. It established that systematic technological advancement could neutralize enemy experience and numerical superiority. Veterans on both sides remembered the Superfortress defensive systems with mixture of awe and respect. American crews praised their reliability, accuracy, and overwhelming effectiveness against Japanese interceptors. Japanese pilots recalled them as the weapons systems that ended their air superiority, the computer-controlled guns that could not be evaded or overwhelmed through traditional fighter tactics. Ground crews appreciated the system's mechanical reliability despite their unprecedented complexity. The influence extended far beyond World War II. The B-29's fire control success established computer-assisted defensive systems as fundamental to strategic bombing effectiveness. The integration of technology, mathematics, and human operators that the General Electric system exemplified became the template for all subsequent bomber defensive development. Post-war strategic bombers incorporated increasingly sophisticated fire control systems based directly on B-29 innovations. Boeing's engineering team, led by Chief Engineer Edward Wells and Fire Control Specialist Carl Scherer, had created more than just an effective bomber defensive system. They had revolutionized aerial warfare by proving that mathematical precision could triumph over human skill and experience. The B-29's concentrated defensive firepower, controlled by analog computers that eliminated human error from gunnery calculations, produced capabilities that individual fighters could not match through superior flying skills. The aircrew members who operated these revolutionary systems wrote their own chapter in aviation history. Technical Sergeant Chen's 18 victories established the effectiveness of computer-controlled defensive fire. Technical Sergeant O'Connor's 22 victories and tactical innovations influenced bomber defensive doctrine for generations. Dozens of other B-29 fire control specialists demonstrated that with proper technological systems and intensive training, American aircrew could dominate any aerial battlefield. The Japanese pilots who faced these defensive systems showed remarkable courage in impossible circumstances. Flying conventional interceptors against overwhelming technological superiority, they continued engaging B-29 formations long after tactical logic suggested such attacks were suicidal. Their testimony about the fire control system's impact provides invaluable historical perspective on the technological revolution in aerial warfare. The physical legacy remains scattered across Pacific battlefields and museum collections worldwide. Crashed B-29s and Japanese fighters dot islands from Saipan to Kyushu. Each wreck site represents aircrews who fought and died in the struggle that established technological superiority as the decisive factor in strategic bombing effectiveness. Local inhabitants occasionally discover fire control components, ammunition, and personal effects that testify to the intensity of these technological battles. Museums worldwide preserve examples of the B-29 Superfortress and its revolutionary fire control systems. Restored aircraft demonstrate their distinctive defensive capabilities at air shows, their remote-controlled turrets still capable of the mechanical precision that shocked Japanese interceptor pilots. Veterans gather to share stories of missions flown and technological barriers broken. Historians continue studying the campaigns where computer-controlled defensive systems proved decisive. The aircraft whose fire control systems shocked Japanese pilots in 1944 remains an icon of American technological achievement and industrial capability. Modern military doctrine still reflects lessons learned in those Pacific skies. Computer-assisted defensive systems remain fundamental to strategic bomber effectiveness. Technological superiority must be matched with intensive training and tactical innovation. Industrial capacity and engineering excellence determine sustained combat effectiveness. The integration of mathematics, technology, and human operators that enabled B-29 defensive superiority remains the gold standard for complex weapons systems development. The transformation from June 1944 to August 1945 was complete and irreversible. The skies that had belonged to Japanese interceptors now belonged to American computer-controlled defensive systems. Japanese air power, which had begun the war as perhaps the world's most experienced and capable, had been systematically neutralized through technological advancement that rendered traditional fighter tactics obsolete. In the final analysis, the B-29's fire control systems represented American industrial democracy's technological answer to military experience and traditional tactics. They proved that systematic engineering could overcome individual skill, that mathematical precision could triumph over human reflexes, that integrated technology could defeat numerical superiority. The computer-controlled defensive systems that Japanese pilots initially dismissed as impossible had changed the nature of aerial warfare permanently. The strategic bombing campaign, where these fire control systems first shocked Japanese interceptors, became the laboratory where modern defensive technology was proven effective. Every computer-controlled weapons system that followed, every precision-guided defensive engagement, every technological solution to tactical problems traces its conceptual lineage to those desperate battles above the Japanese home islands. The B-29 did not merely win a bombing campaign through defensive systems effectiveness. It transformed the fundamental nature of aerial warfare by establishing computer-assisted precision as superior to human skill alone. For the Japanese pilots who survived encounters with these revolutionary systems, the memory of facing B-29 defensive fire remained vivid decades later. In post-war interviews, veterans described the helplessness of approaching bomber formations, knowing that mathematically precise fire would begin at 800 yards and continue throughout their attack runs. They recalled the frustration of perfect tactical approaches being defeated by computer calculations faster and more accurate than human reflexes. They remembered squadron mates falling to defensive systems that engaged from ranges where their own weapons were ineffective. American veterans remembered differently. They recalled the confidence that came from operating the most advanced defensive systems in aviation history. They remembered the satisfaction of watching their fire control computers track multiple targets simultaneously while calculating firing solutions with mathematical precision. They recalled the security of technological superiority that protected their formations throughout the most dangerous bombing missions of the war. The B-29 superfortress had not merely defeated Japanese interceptor capability through defensive firepower. It had revolutionized aerial warfare itself by proving that computer-controlled systems could amplify human effectiveness beyond anything possible through traditional methods. In the skies above Japan, between June 1944 and the war's end, the future of defensive technology was written in tracer rounds and mathematical calculations. That future belonged not to the most maneuverable fighter or the most skilled pilot, but to the nation that could produce superior technology, integrate it with intensive training, and sustain complex systems throughout prolonged campaigns. By war's end, the B-29's fire control systems had shocked, bewildered, and ultimately neutralized Japanese interceptor capability. The computer-controlled defensive systems that Japanese pilots had learned to fear with mathematical precision had systematically eliminated their ability to contest control of the strategic bombing campaign. In doing so, they had secured American air superiority through technological advancement and hastened the end of the Pacific War. The revolution they began in those desperate defensive engagements continues to influence military technology development today, a lasting testament to American engineering innovation and the courage of the aircrew who flew these revolutionary systems into history.